Welcome to this edition of the Kansas City Chiefs Report. I know last Sunday's loss was tough. It hurt. It was a game we all wanted to win, but let's be honest, Chiefs fans have been lucky over the years. This team has given us so many great moments, and one bad game doesn't change that. Yes, the loss to the Eagles was painful. Watching it live was bad enough, but after reviewing the game tape, it looked even worse. The Chiefs fell 40-22, and almost nothing went right. It was one of those nights where the team just couldn't get things going. After breaking down the film, three big problems stood out. The first? The Eagles completely controlled the game with their pass rush. They didn't need to send extra players. They got pressure with just 4 defenders. That made things tough for Kansas City's offense from the start. Let's dive into what went wrong and what the Chiefs need to fix moving forward. The Eagles' defense was dominant. They didn't need to send extra blitzers. They got pressure on Patrick Mahomes with just 4 pass rushers. That made things even harder for the Chiefs' offense. When a defense can get pressure like that, it opens up their entire game plan. Mahomes was under constant pressure all night. He got sacked 6 times, losing a total of 31 yards. But it wasn't just the sacks. He was pressured 15 times throughout the game. The Eagles' defensive strategy worked perfectly. They exposed weaknesses in the Chiefs' offensive line, and Kansas City never found a way to stop them. There's one more thing that hasn't been talked about enough. Was Mahomes playing through a possible concussion? Early in the first quarter, he took a hard hit. His helmet was pushed to the ground, but no one checked him for a concussion. Now, I can't say for sure if he was concussed, but something seemed off. Mahomes didn't look like himself for the rest of the game, and it may explain why he struggled so much. Whatever the reason, it was one of the worst performances of his career. But who do you think is most to blame for the Chiefs' loss? Let's break it down further. Let's be real. Officiating is not the reason the Chiefs lost. When you lose by 18 points, you can't blame the refs. So, what was the biggest reason for Kansas City's loss? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's talk about another major reason the Eagles dominated: Philadelphia's edge rushers. They completely took over the game, making life miserable for Patrick Mahomes. Every time he dropped back to pass, there was pressure coming from both sides. The Chiefs' offensive line simply couldn't handle it. This constant pressure threw off Kansas City's entire game plan. Mahomes didn't have enough time to find his receivers, and the offense never found its rhythm. The Eagles' defense knew exactly what they were doing, and the Chiefs had no answer. Let's break down exactly how Philadelphia's pass rush changed the game. The Eagles' edge rushers played a perfect game against the Chiefs. They stayed disciplined, kept Mahomes contained, and never lost their positioning. Let's break down a few key plays where they completely shut down Kansas City's offense. First, in the first quarter with 10:03 left, the Chiefs faced a 3rd and 9 from their own 24-yard line. The Eagles' pass rushers held their ground, keeping Mahomes in the pocket and forcing him into a tough throw. Their defensive line created just enough pressure, and the Chiefs had no way to escape. The result? A quick stop and a punt, giving the Eagles the ball back. Then, in the second quarter with 7:58 left, the Chiefs had a 2nd and 14 from their own 26-yard line. Once again, the Eagles' defensive front won the battle. They used just their front 4 to generate pressure, keeping Mahomes trapped in the pocket. The Chiefs couldn't find any openings, and the drive stalled. Fast forward to 40 seconds left in the second quarter, Kansas City faced a 3rd and 11 from their 29-yard line. Mahomes had DeAndre Hopkins wide open, but the relentless pressure forced him into an uncharacteristic throw. The ball slipped through Hopkins' hands, but it was clear that Mahomes wasn't comfortable. The Eagles' pressure was affecting his rhythm all night. This constant pressure made it nearly impossible for the Chiefs' offense to find a rhythm. Philadelphia's defensive front was winning the battle, and Kansas City had no answers. Let's dive deeper into how this impacted the rest of the game. Mahomes was under pressure, and that made the throw even harder. Still, DeAndre Hopkins should have caught that pass. It was a big missed opportunity, especially since the Chiefs were trying to score before halftime. But honestly, this was just one of many times the Eagles' pass rush made things difficult for Kansas City all night long. This loss was brutal. I've been a Chiefs fan for a long time, and I have to say, this was one of the most painful losses I've ever experienced. Losing to the Buccaneers in the Super Bowl a few years ago, that was tough, but it was Tom Brady's final big moment. That loss made sense. But this one, the Chiefs never even had a chance. From the very start, the Eagles were in control. There was no momentum, no hope, and no way out. This was a golden opportunity to stay on top, and it just slipped away. What do you think? Was this the worst loss the Chiefs have had in recent years? Let us know your thoughts. Now, let's look at what this means for the team moving forward. Reason number 3. The Eagles exposed the Chiefs' offensive line. All season long, there was a concern in the back of my mind. Could the Chiefs' offensive line hold up when it mattered most? For weeks, they did just enough to get by. But against Philadelphia, their weaknesses were exposed, just like in the Super Bowl loss to Tampa Bay a few years ago. Let's break it down. Even Creed Humphrey, one of the best centers in the league, struggled. His grades were solid, 72.1 overall, 85 in pass blocking, and 65.3 in run blocking. But even he had a costly penalty. That tells you how tough this game was. Then there's Joe Thuney, who has been great all season. But against the Eagles, he allowed a sack, something you just can't afford when facing a dominant pass rush. His grades weren't terrible, 65.0 overall, 60.7 in pass blocking, and 67.6 in run blocking. But one mistake can change a game, and the Chiefs paid the price. Trey Smith might have played his last game in a Chiefs uniform as he heads toward free agency. His 63.2 overall grade and 49.2 pass blocking grade were not good enough. He also gave up a sack and had a penalty, something we saw too often across the entire offensive line. The numbers tell the story. 15 pressures, multiple sacks, costly penalties. The offensive line simply didn't do enough to protect Mahomes, and the Eagles took full advantage. Let's look at what this means for the Chiefs moving forward. Chiefs' offensive line struggles. Continue. The Chiefs' offensive line had one of its worst performances of the season, and it wasn't just one or two players. Everyone struggled. Jawan Taylor had a 62.6 overall grade, with 57.3 in pass blocking and 67.3 in run blocking. While he didn't allow a sack, he committed a costly penalty. Mike Caliendo, filling in at left guard, had a night to forget. His grades were 32.0 overall, 30.1 in pass blocking, and 30.1 in run blocking. He also allowed a sack and committed a penalty. Even the most trusted players, Humphrey, Thuney, and Smith, had issues. Some were better than others, but the entire unit collapsed against a four-man rush. The Eagles didn't even need extra blitzers to dominate the Chiefs' offensive line. That's a huge concern. Now Brett Veach has a tough job ahead. Can the Chiefs keep Trey Smith? Will they find a real solution at left tackle so Thuney can move back to his normal position? There are big questions to answer. The Chiefs need to fix this fast. Otherwise, this won't be the last time we see Patrick Mahomes under constant pressure in a big game.